So how do you calculate what you need for retirement? Or what do you need of your retirement for income? Now, I've been using 10%, but I think that's a goal that you should have with your retirement income. On the other hand, you have to remember there's at least a 3% inflation. So you want to have an income stream that's going to keep up with inflation if you're going to live from 60 to 90 or 100 years of age. So what you want to do is look at, say you had 500,000, 3% for inflation, so if it's earning 10, you want to take out 7. So 7 times 500,000 is 35,000. So this is how you can reverse work it if you're putting money away for retirement, is to look at what kind of income are you looking for to start at 60, 65, 70, whatever your time period is. And then you can calculate how much you need to put away for how long to get to that amount. Now, in the past, financial planners have recommended that you take, when you need retirement, to reduce the risk. And they would suggest moving to 40 to 60% into bonds. Well, if you looked at the long term, you're taking money out of 12 and 16% stuff, putting it in 6% stuff. And that was fine if your life expectancy was 10 years or less. So if you're somebody that retires at 65 and you know you're going to be dead by 75, sure, go ahead and do that. If you have some uncertainty about dying by 75, and you think the risks of living longer are out there, then you should plan for the upside. And you should plan a strategy that will allow that income stream to continue forever. So my strategy is, and this is advocated by a professor out of Canada, and I kind of bought into it, it made sense to me. And that is to take your assets, be 100% invested in stocks, and then when you get within 4 years of your goal, your retirement, when you're going to start to pull money out, you start to transfer into safe money. Maybe it's money market, maybe it's certificate of deposit. An amount so that by the time you retire, you've got 4 years worth of resources. In other words, if you had done that, you retired in 2007, and the market went into the tank, but you had 4 years of saved money, that was what you lived on for the 4 years while the market went through its correction. And then, because that's about the cycle, about 4 years is a typical high or low in the market cycle. So once the market starts to come back up, then you start to pull money back out of your other investments and replenish that safe money place, so that at some point you get back up to having 4 years worth. Last year, with average returns in the 30% range, would have been a good year to bring most of that safe money up to the level that you're comfortable with. But so that would give you, essentially, with that strategy, the amount of money you have for investing is going to stay pretty similar, or pretty safe and similar if you live to be 80, 90, 100, 110. I'm saying I'm going to live to be 120, or that kind of plan ahead, to make sure there's enough resources. My kids don't think I will. But anyway, unless I stay on habitat roofs, they said that might live longer. Okay. So, with long-term life expectancy, I think it makes, and the fact that you've got inflation at 3%, that means every 24 years, the cost of living is going to double. So, if you retired at 65, when you reach 90, everything that you bought at 65 is not going to cost you exactly twice what it costs you at that. So you need to have a portfolio that's going to keep you ahead of that game. Here's my bias, I don't do any business over the phone. Rarely do I call anybody to do business, but I absolutely will not accept any calls. And I think if I had my will, we pass a law that nobody over 65 can be called on the telephone for anything. whether you're a charitable organization, you're a siding salesman, or you're an investment manager, you know, whatever, because people, even the good charities, are preying on our elderly. And I see it all the time when I do taxes, and I see somebody who's got 25 or 30 different gifts to charity. And I know that they don't really like to support all of it, but they have done it because they've been constantly solicited. That was one way to get rid of them. So another tool for getting rid of people that call you that I found works, and some of my clients that work, is to say, my trustee handles all of my money. And it kind of sends two messages. One is, I'm very well off, so don't waste my time. And two, it says that they're gonna have to talk to some banker or some other high-priced person whose whole job is to deal with assets. And our daughter works with the trust department of a bank, so she's kind of one of the people that you would be talking about. Even though I wrote trust for people that they were their own trustees. So even though in reality they were the trustee, making all of their own decisions, they didn't have to disclose that they were the trustees that were making these decisions. But the perception among the callers that if you tell them the trustee is handling the money, you know, you don't even want to go down that road. You don't even want to start down there to talk to anybody. So it's a very kind way of getting rid of nonprofit organizations that they're calling that you don't want to talk to or don't want to support. Okay, spend a few minutes here on sharing tools. Gifting that comes in all forms: cash, stock, real estate, gift annuities, charitable maintenance trusts, and planned giving, which used to be a narrow definition of how you plan your estate, so help charities. I prefer to use the broader definition. That means that any gift you make to any organization is a planned gift. In other words, when we give money to the church, we need to decide, we're going to give cash? No, I don't think so. It would make sense. Do we want to give stock? Yeah, we avoid capital gains, we'll give stock. Or in our case, we've set up a donor advised fund, so sometimes that's the best source to give money. So, but at least decisions like major decisions should be a process that you go through and decide how you want to best. If you get somebody that sells Girl Scout cookies, of course, you know, probably don't go quite that extensive evaluation. Tithing, giving 10%, I think that's a reasonable goal. We belong to what's called the 1% Club, and that's an organization that was set up to encourage people to give 1% of their assets after retirement. So a lot of people, they reach retirement and they tell their local church, hey, I'm on fixed income, I can't keep, you know, usually they cut their gifts in half or they do something like that. We don't have that problem in this church. People are pretty generous in this church. But anyway, the 1% Club has you look at what you have in a different perspective. So if you look just at the investment side of it, you know, if I look at my investments and I give 1% of my investment, what am I really doing? Well, I'm really giving, if I'm earning 10%, 10% of my earnings. You know, and I'm living off the other 90%. Well, that's reasonable, you know. So,
yeah, when you say 10%, what number is the base? Is it gross? Is it after taxes? Is it?
well,
What number is your 10% of what?
Oh, yeah, I mean, you know, the modern tithe by some people is that you do, you know, 5% church and 5% to other charitable organizations from income. And that's usually
From total income?
while you're working. You know, I mean, this would be your salaried income. Now, once you reach retirement, that's where I think you need to change the mindset. And you need to look at, it isn't the, you know, some people would like to say, well, I'm only getting $3,000 from my bank account this month, you know, so that's all I can pay on, you know. Well, you know, they got stock that went up 100,000, or they got other assets that have increased significantly. So that's where we got to change the mindset. Because, you know, the reality is when we retire, what do we need? We need cash. Do we need income? No, we don't want any income. Do we have to pay tax? We've got income. So we want to manage our portfolio, so we have lots of cash coming in and no tax. So if you're trying to judge gifting according to income, then you're gonna wind up giving nothing. When in fact, you know, if you own, as we said, capital gains, assets that you don't pay tax on, you know, some people say, well, I give that income, you know, so we want to get out of the mode of thinking in terms of either retirement income, Social Security, and think more in terms of, I don't need to pull any money out of a stock portfolio. That just keeps growing, but it's really something that's a resource that I should be using and at least considering when I make gifts during each year. So, you know, with the percentage part, you know, I think the 1% of assets, and if you were to say what assets should count, well, I would say that include everything except your home. So in other words, your retirement plans and your well, and when I say, I mean personal property too, I wouldn't necessarily count your car and your jewelry and stuff like that. But let's say, you know, your retirement plans, your IRAs, and your other investments, and focus on the 1% of that.
For those of us still working, is the tithe, the 10%, is that your before tax income or your after tax income?
Well, you see, I would argue it's the before tax income, but if you take in fund retirement plans out of that, and it's, you know, your net is down a little bit lower, you know, that's, but the tithe should be in addition to taxes. I mean, you know, I know people would argue you shouldn't have to pay 10% gift on it, but you pay taxes on it. Well, you know, that's going to be up to the individual. It's certainly the aggressive position we take it just gross number, take do 10%. If not, net is certainly. If people did net, that would be fantastic jump forward. You know, if we could get everybody in our church to do the net, you know, it would be a fantastic windfall for the church and stuff. So, you know, I think it's like everything. You know, where do you want to set your goal, and where do you want to get to eventually? But you know, you start where you're at, and then inch it up. And you know, I think for many people who are true philanthropists, they find that once they start giving, I don't know, there was a, oh, I'm not sure which Dayton it was, William Dayton, I don't know, one of the Dayton brothers wrote an article on giving and talked about, I think it was 12 steps to giving. And first of all, it's talked about, because I was asked to, and then, you know, there was obligations, and then it started to move down to the tithe, and then the 50%, which is the amount I can maximize my deduction from the income tax, you know. And then going beyond that, saying, you know, any amount. In other words, there's a point at which, you know, he was saying that if the company or the charity is doing something they have a passion for, any amount's right. You know, any limit, no limit. Maybe, you know, I can give 20% or 50%, you know, whatever I want to do. So, in other words, as people started to give and they started to pass through these levels of legal side of it, they reach a point where now it's really into it. You know, really want to support this, really want to do this, you know, and it's no longer just a big picture support. It's getting very emotionally into how they can help people. So, but it's a journey. It's not a overnight thing.